I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. I found out while holding a paper plate of macaroni salad standing between the lemonade table and a cooler full of beer. It was June, hot enough that the plastic forks bent when you tried to scoop potato salad. My aunt had just put on a Tracy Lawrence playlist, and someone's toddler was crying near the bounce house. It was my cousin Jenny who said it. She'd just walked over from the grill, flipping her hair out of her face with one hand, a hot dog in the other. So, she said cheerfully, "Are you flying out for Maddie's big day, or just driving in?" I blinked. "What big day?" She laughed, thinking I was being sarcastic. "The wedding, silly. She's finally marrying that guy with the hair gel." "James, right?" I smiled like I knew exactly what she meant. "Oh, yeah, right." Then I excused myself to go check on the deviled eggs, which was code for sitting in my car with the AC on high and trying to breathe through the strange, sudden silence in my chest. Madeline was my baby sister. I helped raise her after Dad died. I held her hair back when she got sick at her first college party and wired her money more than once when she forgot rent was due. I was the one who mailed her a weighted blanket during her first panic attacks and the one who stayed on the phone with her the night she thought James was cheating. And now she was marrying him, with floral arrangements and a venue and apparently a guest list. That didn't include me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes trying to decide if I was hurt, angry, or just tired. The answer was yes, to all three. Inside the house, someone had cut into the strawberry sheet cake. From the window, I could see Jenny chatting with my mother, who wore her usual soft blue summer dress and looked perfectly composed, as if everything in the world was just the way it ought to be. I looked at the plate in my hand. The macaroni was sweating in the heat. They'd planned a wedding my sister didn't even mention, and somehow I was the only one who looked surprised. I waited 2 days before I called my mother. It wasn't because I needed time to calm down. I wasn't angry, exactly. I wasn't even looking for an apology. I think I just needed to hear her say it out loud that they'd planned all of it without me. She picked up on the second ring. "Hi, honey," she said in that warm, efficient voice she used with store clerks and church volunteers. I could picture her in the kitchen wiping down the counter with a dish towel phone nestled between her cheek and shoulder. "Everything all right? I just have a quick question," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Is Maddie getting married?" A pause. A breath. The sound of a refrigerator closing. "Well," she said, as if I'd asked whether the mail had arrived. "Yes. Next month, actually. We didn't know if you'd be free." I didn't know it was happening. She chuckled lightly. "Oh, Claire, don't be dramatic. That word again, dramatic." It was the same tone she used when I cried at Dad's funeral and she told me to pull myself together. The same one she used when I called her in tears after losing my job 5 years ago. "Don't catastrophize, sweetheart. You'll land on your feet." I let the silence settle between us. "You know," she continued, "Madeline really wanted something small. Just family." "I am family," she sighed. "Yes, but you're always traveling, and these things get complicated. James's parents had a lot of input and there were limited spots." "You understand." I didn't, but I knew better than to say that. "You're not mad, are you?" she asked, suddenly softer. "I'm not sure what I am." Another silence, this one heavier. Then, "We thought it would be easier this way. Less pressure on everyone." Easier. That was the word. It wasn't that they forgot me. It's that I was the easy one to erase. I told her I had to get back to work, though I wasn't working that day. She said, "All right, sweetheart," and just like that we hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I opened my calendar, scrolled to next month, and looked at the weekend of the wedding. Nothing scheduled. No RSVP. No seat. I didn't slam doors or post anything online. I didn't call Madeline to demand an explanation or draft a long, sad message no one would answer. Instead, I bought a ticket to Iceland. I didn't tell anyone, not my co-workers, not my neighbor who usually brought in my mail when I was gone, not even my friend Julia who had stood beside me through 2 breakups and a layoff and knew my coffee order better than the barista. I just stopped answering things. That Friday, I submitted a vacation request to HR, packed a small suitcase, and left a single sticky note on my fridge. "Gone. Don't wait up." The flight from Boston to Reykjavik was quiet. I didn't watch a movie. I didn't read. I stared at the flight map on the tiny seatback screen, a glowing white line arcing over Greenland like a scar. By sunrise, I was standing in a rental cabin carved into a hillside of volcanic rock, half covered in moss and silence. The lake outside looked frozen, even though it wasn't. The windows fogged over in the morning. The shower smelled faintly of sulfur. I loved it immediately. For 24 hours, I didn't check my phone. The second day, I took a walk down to the edge of the lagoon. There was a wooden bench half buried in snow, and I sat there until I couldn't feel my hands. I took a photo. It wasn't perfect. I wasn't smiling. Just a figure in a wool coat sitting by still water under a white sky. No caption. No tag. Just the image. I posted it to my Instagram story. Within 10 minutes, the scene list lit up Madeline. My cousin Jenny, my mother. No one said a word. I didn't expect them to. That wasn't the point. The point was that they saw me. Not at the bridal shower, not at the rehearsal dinner, not at the wedding planning brunch I hadn't even heard about, but here in a country of glaciers and steam and silence, I had become momentarily visible. I posted nothing the next day, just lived. I drank bitter coffee from a ceramic mug and watched the fog roll in over the lake. I wrote in my journal, nothing poetic, just lists of things I didn't have to do here. No small talk. No pretending I was fine. No RSVP. No gift registry. Only me. And the sound of ice shifting in the wind. I knew the wedding was that weekend, though no one had said the date out loud to me. I figured it out the same way you learn most things your family doesn't want you to know from social media and side comments. My cousin Trish had posted a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking beside a caption that read, "Love is in the air," and someone else tagged a boutique hotel 2 hours outside Albany. That was enough. Saturday morning in Iceland was silver and quiet. I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and watched the light creep slowly across the lake. There were no church bells here, no wedding playlists or bridesmaids laughing behind closed doors. Just snow, steam, stillness. I made oatmeal. I didn't check my phone. By late afternoon, the wedding had likely started. Maybe Madeline was walking down the aisle in something lace and sleeveless, our mother crying on cue. I imagined soft, lighting pastel flowers filtered joy. And somewhere in the photos there would be a missing chair. Not obviously. They'd have filled the seat or rearranged the row, but I knew where I was supposed to be, and I wasn't there. That night, I posted a new image. It was just my hand holding a ceramic cup against the backdrop of the frozen lake. The sky was lavender. My nail polish chipped slightly on one finger. Nothing glamorous. Nothing posed. No caption. Again. The scene by list rolled in within minutes. Madeline. Our mother. 2 of her friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Still, no one messaged. Still, nothing was said. But this time I could feel it. The quiet had shifted. It was no longer absence. It was presence withheld. I imagined them scrolling through their phones between dances or desserts, seeing my post in a moment of pause and wondering if it meant something. It did. It meant I knew. It meant I was watching not out of jealousy or malice, but because I had once mattered here. And now, I didn't. Not enough to be invited, but enough to haunt the edge of the frame. I didn't post again for 2 days. Let them notice the silence. Let them fill it with whatever story they needed to tell themselves. I had nothing to add. 3 days after the wedding, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was barely 6 in the morning, and outside the sky was a pale gray, the kind of color that made you forget the sun ever existed. The phone kept buzzing messages, missed calls, more messages. At first I thought maybe someone had died, but the names on the screen told a different story. Lindsay, Aunt Carol, my mother, then Madeline's college roommate, then finally Julia, the only one who ever really told me the truth. Her message was short. No greeting, no build-up. You need to see this. She attached a link, a TikTok. No context, just a thumbnail of what looked like a reception hall and something blurry flying through the air. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted to open it. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But I clicked. The video started mid-chaos, shouting gasps movement. A bridesmaid was screaming not in joy, but fury, her voice cracking as she threw a bouquet across the room, not in ceremony, but in rage. People were standing, turning, backing away. Someone knocked over a centerpiece. Glass shattered somewhere off screen. Then the camera found Madeline. She was crying. Not delicate tears, but shaking red-faced mascara running. She was yelling something, though the audio was distorted. The voice that came next was clearer. "You were my best friend, Maddie. My maid of honor, and you were sleeping with him the whole time." The voice belonged to Rachel, her best friend since freshman year, the same girl who helped plan the bachelorette trip, the same girl who apparently had planned on marrying James herself. My stomach dropped. Another guest's voice, this one half laughing in disbelief, said, "That's the maid of honor!" The camera panned just enough to catch James frozen between them, hands raised, like a man trying to tame wild animals. He said something no one caught. It didn't matter. The crowd had already started to move, guests whispering, grabbing coats, gathering purses. One woman walked out with her napkin still in her hand. The video ended with Madeline sinking to the floor. I watched it twice. Then I turned my phone over and stared at the ceiling of my cabin. The wood beams creaked in the cold. Somewhere outside, a bird made a sound I couldn't name. The buzzing started again. Voicemails, missed calls, new texts piling on top of the old. No one said the words, but they didn't have to. "Please call me. Your sister's a mess. We need you home. Claire, please." By noon, I had a voicemail from my mother, her voice wobbling in and out like a radio signal from another life. In it, she said Madeline wasn't eating, that the family was embarrassed, that people were talking. She didn't mention me being right. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "We don't know what to do without you." I sat at the window, bare feet pressed to the cold floor, watching the lake ripple under wind. My phone buzzed again. This time it was from Rachel. Not a call, just a message. "I'm sorry you weren't there. You probably would have stopped me." She was wrong. I wouldn't have stopped her. I would have let the truth find its way in, just like I did. By early afternoon, my phone had stopped ringing and started pleading. The voicemails were no longer brisk or annoyed. They were softer now. My mother left 6 of them in under 3 hours, each one a little more frayed than the last. In the third, she was crying or trying to. Her voice cracked in places it never used to. "Claire," she whispered, "your sister is devastated. I don't think she's left her room since Saturday. We don't know what to say to her. We need you home. You've always been the strong one, the one who holds everyone together." That line again, the strong one, the one who knew how to carry things, who never asked to be carried. I didn't respond. Instead, I boiled water for tea and stepped outside, letting the steam warm my face while the wind cut through my sleeves. The sky above me was endless, low-hung quiet. I took a photo of the horizon, faint pink light resting on the edge of a glacier, and posted it without a word. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "She's not well. She keeps asking for you. Claire, please." Just 5 minutes. That one was from my father's sister. A woman who once told me after Dad died that older daughters are like extra mothers. I was 15. I watched the snow drift across the porch step and said nothing. That evening, a message came in from Madeline herself. Not a call, just a text. "I know I hurt you. I didn't think it would matter this much. I thought you didn't want to be part of things anymore. Please, I need you. I don't know who else to ask." I stared at the message for a long time, not because I didn't believe it, but because it was the first real thing she'd said to me in years. But it wasn't enough. Not after all the times she had taken my help, but not my presence. Not after letting me fade out of the family photo without asking if I was still standing there. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. And now that everything was falling apart, they wanted the scaffolding back. But I wasn't made of steel anymore. I had become glacier. Cold, still, unmovable. It was almost midnight when the phone rang again. This time I picked up. Not out of forgiveness, not because I'd softened. I just didn't want the silence to say everything for me. "Claire." My mother breathed like she'd been holding her voice for hours. I didn't speak. She waited, then filled the space the way she always did, with explanation disguised as care. "She's not doing well," she said quietly. "Madeline, she barely eats. She doesn't come downstairs. She keeps asking if you've responded." I could hear the clink of something ceramic in the background. Her kitchen, most likely. Probably the same blue teacup she always used when she needed to appear gentler. "I wish you were here," she added. I looked out the window of my cabin. Outside, the lake had turned to glass. The sky was low and endless, the kind of cold that made sound feel smaller. I said finally, "for years. You just didn't see me." There was a pause, not defensive, not quick, just still. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said, her voice thinner now. "You never said." No one asked. She let out a breath, not quite a sigh, just the sound of realizing there's no script left that still works. "I'm sorry," she said, but it came out like a question. I didn't answer. Somewhere in the silence, she understood, because for once, she didn't try to fix it. No excuses, no soft rewrites of history. Just the sound of her breath, the faint chime of a clock in the background, the quiet of two people realizing something had ended a long time ago, and this was just the echo. "Are you coming home?" she asked after a while. I looked around the room, the wooden floor, the wool blanket on the chair, the sound of wind against the windows. Everything simple. Everything mine. "No," I said gently. "I think I'm finally home." We didn't say goodbye. We just let the call fade. I sat there a while, listening to the quiet. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't comfort me either. It just felt true. The next morning, I woke early. The cabin was still the kind of stillness that doesn't ask anything from you. I wrapped myself in a thick sweater and stepped onto the back deck. The lake below was smooth as glass, reflecting the pale gold of a rising sun. The sky stretched wide and empty, and for once, that emptiness felt like peace. I made tea, scribbled a few lines in my journal, then pulled out the thick stationery I'd brought from home, but never used. I wrote one letter. Short, plain. No accusations. No lists of what had been done or left undone. Just this: I hope you find peace. I hope you tell the truth. I hope next time the invitation comes before the apology. Claire. I signed it with my full name, folded it carefully, addressed it to the house I grew up in, no return address. I walked into town later that day and dropped it in a red post box near a bakery that smelled like cardamom and ash. The man behind the counter nodded as I passed, recognizing me from the morning before. "Cold today," he said. I smiled. "Not as much as yesterday." On the way back, I stopped by the edge of the lagoon. A single bench faced the water. I sat for a while sipping coffee from a paper cup, watching the steam rise and disappear. My phone was still in my pocket, untouched. When I returned to the cabin, I posted one last photo. A chair, wooden empty, framed by snow. Beyond it, the lake. No caption, but I knew they'd see it. Not because they followed me, but because people always notice what's missing once it's too quiet for too long. That night, I didn't check messages. Didn't scroll. Didn't wonder what they were saying back home. Instead, I made soup, lit a candle, pulled a blanket across my lap, and read the same page of a book 3 times, not because I was distracted, but because I wasn't in a hurry to leave the quiet. There was no victory in this. Just clarity. No closure. Just space. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I just felt still.
The first red flag should have been when Diana, my mother-in-law's best friend, pulled me aside at last year's party. "Honey," she whispered, wine glass in hand. "Margaret's been different since the divorce. Maybe this big reunion isn't the best idea." But I was too caught up in my plans to listen. 8 months of secret preparations, coordinating with relatives across 4 continents, and managing a budget that made my accountant husband, James, wince, all to give Margaret the one thing she always claimed she wanted: her entire family together again. I found the old photo album in Margaret's attic while helping her declutter, her word for moving her designer clothes into a bigger closet. It was filled with pictures from the last big Matthews family reunion in 1985. Margaret looked so young, surrounded by siblings, cousins, and relatives who'd since scattered across the globe. Those were the days, she'd sighed, tracing faces in the faded photographs. Before everyone moved away, before the family fell apart. She didn't add before Robert left me for his 28-year-old yoga instructor. But I heard it anyway. That's when the idea took root. Margaret's 65th birthday was coming up, And what better gift than reuniting her beloved family? I should have remembered that my mother-in-law's nostalgia was as carefully curated as her social media presence. The planning became my second job. Late-night calls to Australia to coordinate with Margaret's younger sister, Helen. Early morning Zoom meetings with cousins in Italy and Brazil. Endless email chains about dietary restrictions and hotel arrangements. James thought I was crazy, but he kept our joint account funded and his mouth shut. Mom's not great with surprises, he warned one night. Remember our surprise anniversary party for her and Dad? I did remember. Margaret had shown up with her tennis instructor as her date, knowing full well Robert would be there with his new wife. The resulting scene made the local gossip columns. This is different, I insisted. This is about family, not drama. Oh, how wrong I was. Everything was set for the perfect surprise. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom was booked for Saturday. 45 relatives were secretly flying in, some having never met their American cousins. Helen even convinced their estranged brother, Thomas, to come from New Zealand, the first time he'd be in the same room as Margaret since their fathers contested while reading in 1999. Diana had been my inside source, helping coordinate Margaret's schedule and keeping her from making other plans, or so I thought. The text came at 7:43 a.m. on Saturday morning, just as I was heading to the hotel to oversee setup. Darling, spontaneous opportunity. The girls and I are taking a cruise to the Bahamas. Last minute thing, couldn't resist. Don't wait up. Love, M. I stared at my phone, wondering if this was some elaborate joke. Then Diana called. Catherine, I'm so sorry, she began, her voice heavy with what I now recognize as guilt. I should have told you sooner. Told me what, Diana? Margaret booked this cruise 3 months ago. She showed me the tickets at Bridge Club. She said she knew you were planning something for her birthday and she didn't want to deal with any forced family bonding. The world tilted sideways. 3 months ago. She'd known for 3 months and still let me keep planning, keep spending, keep hoping. I pulled into the hotel parking lot where James was already waiting. One look at my face and he knew. Mom, he asked simply. I nodded, showing him the text. His jaw tightened, the same expression he'd worn during his parents' divorce proceedings. The first guest land in 2 hours, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Helen's whole family is on a plane right now. Thomas is probably already in New York for his layover. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so much like his mother's, it hurt to watch. So what do we do? I looked at my phone again, at the dozens of messages from excited relatives sharing their travel updates. At the hotel entrance, where the staff was already setting up welcome signs. At the photo album I brought for the memory table, filled with images of a family Margaret claimed to miss but had actively avoided for decades. We have 45 people coming to celebrate family, I said slowly, so let's give them a celebration they'll actually enjoy, without the guests of honor who never wanted to be honored in the first place. James' eyebrows shot up. You want to have the reunion without Mom? Why not? Her siblings haven't seen each other in 20 years. Some cousins have never even met their American relatives. Second cousins don't even know each other exist. I felt energy returning to my voice. Your mother might not want her family, but maybe her family needs each other. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Helen. Just landed in Chicago for our connection. Can't wait to see everyone, especially Maggie. The kids are so excited. I showed James the text. Should we tell them? He stared at the message for a long moment, then straightened his shoulders. Nothing like his mother's posture now. No, he said firmly. Let's give them the reunion they came for. Mom made her choice. Again. We walked into the hotel, where tables were being set with fine linens and old family photos I'd collected were being arranged on display boards. In 3 hours, this room would be filled with people sharing the same blood as Margaret Matthews, but possibly carrying very different hearts. Diana, I said into my phone, I need you to send me those cruise receipts. I think it's time everyone knew exactly when Margaret decided to abandon her family. Again, the party was about to become something very different than planned. Sometimes the best celebrations are the ones where the expected guest of honor reveals their true colors by not showing up at all. The first relatives arrived just as I finished rearranging the welcome banner to read Matthew's Family Reunion, instead of Happy 65th Birthday Margaret. Helen burst through the hotel doors, her 3 teenage children trailing behind, their Australian accents mixing with excited chatter. "Catherine," she embraced me warmly. "Where's my sister hiding? I can't wait to see her face." The moment I'd been dreading. I pulled Helen aside while James distracted the kids with promises of the hotel's indoor pool. "Helen, there's something you need to know." I showed her the text and Diana's revelation about the cruise tickets. Helen's face moved through a kaleidoscope of emotions: confusion, hurt, anger, and finally, a resigned understanding. "Oh, that's so Maggie," she sighed. "Always running away when things get too real. Did I ever tell you she missed my wedding because she found a can't-miss spa weekend at the last minute?" Before I could respond, a familiar voice boomed across the lobby. "Is that little Helen Matthews I hear?" Thomas, the estranged brother, stood in the doorway, looking exactly like his photo, except for the silver threading his dark hair. Helen's eyes filled with tears. "Tommy?" She hadn't seen her brother since the will-reading disaster. "You actually came." While he smiled, I was promised a dramatic Maggie meltdown. Speaking of which, he looked around the lobby. "About that," Helen said, linking her arm through his. "Our sisters pulled a classic Maggie. But you know what? Maybe that's exactly what this family needed." Over the next hour, the hotel lobby filled with Matthew's relatives from every corner of the globe. Cousins who'd only known each other through Facebook met face to face. Second cousins discovered shared interests and uncanny family resemblances. Children who'd never met formed instant bonds over shared traits like the distinctive Matthews laugh. I watched from the registration table as James explained his mother's absence to each new arrival. Instead of the anger or disappointment I feared, most reactions were knowing headshakes and eye rolls. "Aunt Margaret hasn't changed a bit," said Maria, a cousin from Brazil. "She RSVP'd to my daughter's wedding last year, then claimed her dog was having emotional problems the day before. Remember when she promised to host in '99? Thomas added, joining the conversation. "She sold her house 2 weeks before and moved to a 1-bedroom condo. So sorry, no room." As more stories emerged, a pattern became clear. Margaret's absence wasn't shocking. It was on brand. Diana arrived around noon, clutching a large envelope. "I brought everything," she said, looking guilty but determined. The cruise receipts, the group chat screenshots where she bragged about avoiding the reunion. And something else you should see. She pulled out a stack of declined RSVPs from over the years. Weddings, graduations, baptisms, anniversaries, all sent by Margaret. All with perfectly crafted excuses. "She keeps them," Diana explained. "Like trophies. Says it's easier to avoid disappointment by disappointing others first." James took the envelope, his face unreadable. "You've known about this collection." Diana nodded miserably. She called it her boundary maintenance system. I should have said something sooner, but she was your friend, I finished. Was. After seeing all these families together today, watching them heal without her, I can't keep enabling this. The ballroom was alive with laughter and conversation. Helen's kids were teaching their Italian cousins Australian slang. Thomas was showing old family photos to a group of fascinated younger relatives, filling in gaps in their shared history. "Should we tell them about this?" I asked James, gesturing to the envelope of evidence. He watched his Aunt Helen hugging the cousin she hadn't seen in 30 years, both women crying and laughing simultaneously. "No," he decided. "Mom's spent decades making sure everyone remembers her absences. Let's give them one day to forget about her and remember each other instead." As if to prove his point, someone started playing the piano in the corner, a Matthews family tradition. Soon, voices joined in familiar songs taught by grandparents who had passed, but whose legacy lived on through shared memories and melodies. "You know what's funny?" Helen said, joining us by the registration table. "I came here hoping to reconnect with Maggie, but I've forgotten how much I miss everyone else. Maybe she did us a favor." "How do you mean?" I asked. "If she were here, everything would revolve around her drama, her divorce, her feelings, her needs. Without her, we're actually getting to know each other again." Looking around the room, I saw what she meant. Conversations flowed freely, unburdened by Margaret's careful social choreography. Real connections were being forged, without performance or pretense. "Should we send her a thank you note?" Thomas quipped, joining his sister. "Dear Maggie, thanks for choosing another escape. You finally managed to bring the family together by staying away. As the afternoon wore on, it became clear that Margaret's absence had transformed from a potential disaster into an unexpected blessing. The reunion she never wanted had become exactly what everyone else needed. Diana's phone buzzed, another text from Margaret. "Weather's perfect. Hope you're not all too bored without me." James took the phone and typed a reply that would change everything. "Actually, Mom, we need to talk about some family photos that came to light today. The whole family sends their love. All 45 of them." Margaret's response came 3 days later, after her spontaneous cruise docked and she could no longer hide behind airplane mode. By then, family reunion photos had flooded social media. Genuine smiles, heartfelt embraces, and most importantly, not a single mention of the missing matriarch. Her first call was to Diana, who didn't answer. Her second was to James, who let it go to voicemail. Her third was to me. "How dare you," she hissed when I picked up. "You turned my entire family against me, made me look like the villain." "No, Margaret," I replied calmly. "You did that all by yourself, 3 months ago when you bought those cruise tickets." Silence crackled over the line. "Then, Diana showed you those." "Diana showed us everything. The declined RSVPs you collected, the group chats where you bragged about avoiding family events. Tell me, did you enjoy your cruise as much as you enjoyed knowing 45 people had flown across the world for you?" "I never asked for that reunion." Her voice turned defensive. "I never wanted." "Yes, you made that very clear." I cut in. "But here's what you missed while you were sipping cocktails on deck. Thomas and Helen reconciling after 20 years. Your great nieces and nephews meeting for the first time. Cousin Maria naming her new baby after your mother. Your family healing without you." Another pause. They named a baby after Mom. "The family you keep running from? They're still a family. They're just done waiting for you to show up." The line went quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard something I'd never heard before. Margaret Matthews crying. "I didn't think they'd do it without me," she whispered. I thought they needed me there to be a family." "No, Margaret, they needed you not to be there. Without you orchestrating every interaction, controlling every narrative, they could just be themselves. Be a real family." James found me in the kitchen after I hung up. "Mom?" he asked simply. I nodded. "She's upset." "She's always upset," he sighed. "But this time feels different." He was right. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. The carefully curated social media posts about her amazing girls' cruise stopped. The usual round of excuses for upcoming family events didn't materialize. Instead, Margaret went quiet. Then Helen called. "You'll never believe this," she said without preamble. "Maggie called me." Actually called, not texted. She apologized for missing my wedding. Said she was scared of seeing our parents together after their divorce. We talked for 3 hours. Similar calls came from other relatives. Margaret was reaching out, one burned bridge at a time, not with grand gestures or elaborate excuses, but with simple, painful honesty. I think, Diana told me over coffee, seeing those reunion photos broke something in her. All those people she'd been avoiding, having the time of their lives without her carefully managed drama. It was a wake-up call. The real test came 2 months later. Maria's baby naming ceremony was approaching, the first family event since the reunion. The invitation sat on Margaret's desk for days, according to Diana. The response when it came wasn't an elaborate excuse or a last-minute cancellation. Just a simple note. "I'd like to come if I'm still welcome." No drama promised. And she showed up early, wearing a simple dress instead of her usual designer outfit. No grand entrance, no demands for attention. She sat quietly through the ceremony, watching her great niece receive the name Margaret Rose, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. At the reception, I found her sitting alone, looking at photos from the reunion on her phone. "They look so happy," she said without looking up, without me there to complicate everything. "They can be that happy with you too," I replied, "just not the old you." She nodded slowly. "I spent so many years running away from family obligations that I forgot why I was running. It was easier to be the dramatic absent relative than risk being the vulnerable present one." James joined us, sitting beside his mother. "You know, Mom, the family's planning a gathering. Smaller than the reunion, but—" "I'll be there," she said quickly, then caught herself. "I mean, I'd like to be there. If that's okay." Later that evening, as the baby naming celebration wound down, I watched Margaret tentatively join a conversation with her siblings. No performance, no drama, just three people sharing memories and gentle laughter. "You know what's funny?" James said, sliding his arm around my waist. "All those years Mom claimed she kept every declined RSVP to maintain boundaries. Turns out she was really keeping track of everything she'd missed." I thought about the envelope of regrets Diana had shown us, seeing them now not as trophies but as receipts of loss. Sometimes people have to see what they're missing to understand what they've lost. Margaret was learning that lesson late in life, but she was learning. And maybe that's what family is really about, not perfect attendance or flawless performances, but the willingness to show up, even after years of running away, and simply try again. The reunion that happened without her had given Margaret something she never expected, the chance to be part of the family she'd spent so long avoiding. Sometimes the best celebrations are the ones that change us, even if we weren't there to celebrate. I never thought I'd have to teach my 12-year-old son about the darker side of human nature, especially not because of someone who was supposed to be family. But watching Tommy wake up at 5 a.m. every morning for his paper route, count his money each night, and search online for the perfect vintage watch for his dad, only to have it all destroyed by his stepmom's greed, broke something in me I didn't know could break. It started last January when Tommy came to me with a determined look in his eyes. "Mom, I want to get a paper route," he said over his breakfast cereal. "Dad's birthday is in December, and I want to get him something really special this year." My heart squeezed. Since Mark and I divorced 3 years ago, Tommy had struggled to maintain his relationship with his father. It didn't help that Victoria, Mark's new wife of 8 months, seemed determined to micromanage every aspect of their interactions. "Are you sure, honey?" I asked. "That's a big commitment." "I'm sure, Mom. Dad always wears those fancy watches when he goes to work meetings. I want to get him one like that, but old and special, you know? Like the ones he shows me in his magazines." So we signed him up for the paper route. Every morning, rain or shine, Tommy would drag himself out of bed, put on his reflective vest, and head out to deliver papers. He never complained, not even during the brutal summer heat or the early autumn storms. "Look, Mom," he'd exclaim every Friday, proudly counting his earnings. "I'm getting closer." The money went into a special box he decorated with watch pictures from his dad's old magazines. Victoria called me in March, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Sarah, don't you think Tommy's too young for a paper route? It seems like such a burden." I could hear the real message beneath her words, that I was a bad mother for letting him work. "He wanted to do this himself," I replied firmly. "He's learning responsibility and the value of hard work." She laughed that tinkling laugh I'd grown to hate. "Oh, sweetie, there are better ways to teach those lessons. Mark and I could just give him an allowance." But Tommy didn't want their money. He wanted to earn this himself. By November, he had saved $300. We spent hours online together, searching through vintage watch sites until he found it. A 1960s Timex with a leather band similar to the expensive ones Mark collected but with its own historical charm. "Dad's going to love it," Tommy whispered, staring at the picture. "It's like the ones he shows me, but it has its own story." The watch arrived a week before Mark's birthday. Tommy couldn't stop smiling as he wrapped it carefully in silver paper, tucking a handwritten card underneath the bow. He even saved an extra $20 to buy a display box. Mark's birthday dinner was at their house. Victoria's idea, of course. She'd invited their country club friends, turning what should have been a family celebration into a social event. Tommy clutched his gift as we walked up their manicured driveway. "Maybe wait until the guests leave to give it to him," I suggested, noting the expensive cars lining the street. But Tommy shook his head. "Dad always says special moments should be shared." Victoria opened the door in a cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Oh, you're here," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Tommy, honey, your father's in the living room with the Hendersons. Why don't you go say hello?" I watched my son straighten his shoulders and walk toward his father's voice, the silver package held carefully in front of him. Mark was mid-conversation when Tommy approached, but he turned immediately when his son called out, "Dad, happy birthday." The room quieted as Tommy held out his gift. "I've been saving all year," he explained proudly. "I picked it out special." Mark's face softened as he took the package. "All year, buddy. You didn't have to do that." Open it, Dad. Please. As Mark began carefully unwrapping the paper, Victoria appeared beside him, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his shoulder. The moment the vintage watch was revealed, her nose wrinkled. "Oh, honey," she said in that condescending tone that made my blood boil. "Your father doesn't wear, well, cheap things." Tommy's face fell. "It's not cheap," he protested quietly. "It's vintage, like the ones in Dad's magazines." Mark shot Victoria a look I couldn't quite read. "It's very thoughtful, Tommy, thank you." But the damage was done. Tommy's moment, his proud revelation of nearly a year's work, had been tainted. He retreated to my side as Victoria smoothly steered the conversation back to their club friends. "Can we go home, Mom?" Tommy whispered, and my heart shattered at the tremor in his voice. "Of course, honey. Let me just grab my purse from the kitchen." That's when I saw it. Victoria's designer handbag was open on the counter, and right there, partially sticking out, was a familiar gift receipt along with several crisp $100 bills. My hands shook as I snapped a quick photo with my phone. Something told me I'd need proof of what I was seeing. "Ready, Mom?" Tommy called from the hallway. "Coming, sweetie." I took one last look at the receipt in Victoria's bag, anger burning in my chest. I didn't know yet exactly what she was planning. But I knew one thing for certain. She had severely underestimated a mother's determination to protect her child's heart. As we drove home, Tommy was unusually quiet, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. "He didn't really like it, did he?" he finally asked. "Your dad loves that you thought of him," I assured him, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Sometimes adults just don't show their feelings the right way. But I knew this wasn't over. Victoria's handbag had told me everything I needed to know about what would happen next, and I was already planning how to handle it. The next week was eerily quiet. Tommy went to his dad's house for his regular Wednesday visit but came home subdued. When I asked about the watch, he just shrugged and said Dad hadn't mentioned it. I could see the hurt in his eyes, but he was trying so hard to be brave about it. What Tommy didn't know was that I'd been building my case. The photo of Victoria's handbag with the receipt and cash was just the beginning. I'd also saved all of Tommy's paper route payment records, kept the original watch purchase documentation, and most importantly, had security camera footage from our front porch showing Tommy diligently heading out for his route every morning. My suspicions were confirmed when I checked our joint custody banking app on Friday morning. There was a new deposit from Mark, $300 with a note that read, "Reimbursing Tommy for returned watch." My blood ran cold. They had returned it without even telling him. I was in the middle of documenting this new evidence when my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Sarah, dear. Just wanted to let you know we returned that old watch Tommy got. Mark and I felt it wasn't appropriate. We'll take him shopping for something more suitable this weekend. No need to mention this to him. We don't want to hurt his feelings." I had to read the message 3 times, each time feeling my anger rise. The audacity of this woman to not only return my son's heartfelt gift, but to try to cover it up and control the narrative was astounding. Before I could respond, another text came through. "Oh, and we put the money in your account. Perhaps you could guide him toward more appropriate gifts in the future." That emoji was the final straw. I was about to type a response that would have made a sailor blush when my phone rang. It was Mark. "Sarah," he started, sounding uncomfortable. "About Tommy's gift. You mean the one your wife returned without telling our son?" My voice was ice cold. Victoria thought. "No, Mark. Stop right there. Do you have any idea what Tommy did to buy that watch? Do you know he got up at 5 a.m. every single morning for a year? That he worked through summer heat, rain, and cold? That he researched vintage watches because he wanted to connect with your interests?" There was a long pause on the other end. I didn't know about the paper route." "Of course you didn't, because you've let Victoria control every aspect of your relationship with our son. And now she's taken the one thing he worked so hard to give you." "Sarah, you're overreacting. We can just." "Just what, Mark? Buy his love with your credit card. Teach him that his efforts don't matter as long as something's expensive enough for Victoria's taste." I heard Victoria's voice in the background, asking who was calling. Mark's voice became muffled, like he was covering the phone. "Look," he said finally, "what's done is done. The watch is returned. We'll take him shopping this weekend and—" "No, you won't," I cut him off. Because this weekend, Tommy and I are going to have a long talk about self-worth and respect. And then we're going to discuss how some adults in his life have failed him miserably. You can't turn our son against us. Victoria's voice suddenly came through clearly. She must have taken the phone from Mark. I don't mean to turn him against anyone, Victoria. Your actions have done that all on their own. Oh, and by the way, I have proof of everything. The receipt in your bag, the cash you pocketed, your text trying to cover it up. Everything. Are you threatening me? Her voice rose an octave. No, I'm promising you something. This ends now. The games, the manipulation, the undermining of my son's efforts. All of it, because if it doesn't, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. I heard Mark in the background asking what was going on, and Victoria's muffled response. You're making a mistake, Victoria hissed into the phone. No, you made the mistake when you thought you could hurt my child and get away with it. I ended the call and sat there, shaking with anger and adrenaline. Through the kitchen window, I could see Tommy shooting baskets in the driveway, each throw a little more aggressive than the last. He was working through his own feelings about all this, even if he didn't know the full story yet. My phone buzzed again. Multiple messages from both Mark and Victoria. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop and started composing an email to my lawyer. If they wanted to play hardball, I was more than ready. But first, I needed to have an honest conversation with my son. He deserved to know that his efforts weren't unnoticed or unappreciated. And more importantly, he needed to understand that some gifts, like his dedication, thoughtfulness, and hard work, were worth more than any watch could ever be. I grabbed 2 sodas from the fridge and headed outside. It was time for Tommy to learn another important life lesson. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up to family. Hey, buddy, I called out. Can we talk? Tommy and I sat on the front porch steps, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across our yard. I handed him a soda and watched as he fiddled with the tab, something he always did when he was anxious. Mom, he said before I could start, I know they returned the watch. I nearly choked on my drink. How did you find out? He gave me a sad smile that looked too old for his 12-year-old face. I heard Victoria telling Dad it wasn't appropriate for his image when I was supposed to be doing homework in the study. She didn't know I could hear them. My heart ached. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. It's okay, Mom. I kind of expected it. Victoria never likes anything that isn't from her favorite stores. He took a sip of his soda. But you know what really hurts? Dad just stood there and let her do it. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, feeling him lean into me like he used to when he was smaller. Sometimes adults make mistakes, especially when they're trying to please other people. Your dad, he's making a big mistake right now. I just wanted to get him something special. Tommy's voice cracked slightly, something that showed I paid attention when he talked about watches, that I cared about what he likes. And that's what makes you an amazing son. I squeezed his shoulder. You put thought and effort and love into that gift. Anyone who can't see the value in that doesn't deserve it. Just then, a car pulled into our driveway. Mark's Tesla. Tommy stiffened beside me. You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to, I whispered. No, Tommy stood up, straightening his shoulders. I want to. Mark got out first, looking uncomfortable. Victoria emerged from the passenger side, clutching her designer handbag, the same one that had held the evidence of her deception. Tommy, Mark started, but his son cut him off. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Tommy's voice was clear and strong. About returning my gift. Victoria stepped forward, her heels clicking on our driveway. Sweetie, we just wanted to get you something better. No, Tommy's voice cracked, but he pressed on. You wanted to pretend I didn't spend a whole year working for something. You wanted to replace it with your money like you tried to replace everything else. Mark's face paled. Son, we didn't mean. I got up every morning at 5 a.m., Tommy continued, tears now flowing freely. I worked through rain and cold, and when I was sick, I researched vintage watches because Dad always talks about how things with history have more meaning. But none of that mattered, did it? Victoria's perfectly composed face finally showed a crack of emotion. We were only thinking of what's best. Best for who? I interjected, standing beside my son. Best for your image? Best for your country club friends? Because it certainly wasn't best for Tommy. Mark took a step toward us, but Tommy backed away. I don't want to go shopping with you this weekend, he said firmly. I don't want another gift. I just want my dad back, the one who used to care about what I thought and felt before he let you make all his decisions. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's hand tightened on her back. Mark looked like someone had punched him in the gut. Tommy, Mark's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. Me too, Dad, Tommy replied, turning toward the front door. Mom, can I go inside? I nodded, watching as my brave, hurt, wonderful son walked away with his head held high. Before following him, I turned to Mark and Victoria. The money you reimbursed has been donated to the Children's Hospital. I've documented everything about this incident, including your attempts to hide it from Tommy. From now on, any decisions about my son will include his feelings and wishes, not your social standing. Are we clear? They both nodded, Victoria for once speechless. And Mark, I added as they turned to leave, that vintage watch, it wasn't just a gift. It was your son showing you he loved you enough to work hard for something he thought would make you happy. Remember that the next time you let someone else decide what's appropriate for your image. As I watched them drive away, I heard the basketball bouncing in the backyard, Tommy's way of working through his emotions. I grabbed another soba and headed out back. Sometimes the hardest lessons our children learn aren't the ones we plan to teach them, but watching Tommy stand up for himself, seeing him recognize his own worth despite others' attempts to diminish it, that was a lesson worth more than any watch could ever be. And as for Victoria, well, she learned a valuable lesson too. Never underestimate a child's ability to see through adult pretenses or a mother's determination to protect her son's heart. I never thought a family photo album could start a war, but I clearly underestimated my mother-in-law, Barbara. Looking back, the signs were there from the moment I married her son, David, 3 years ago. She'd removed every wedding photo from her walls the day I moved in, claiming she was redecorating. I should have known then that my past would always be a problem for her. I'd been widowed at 29 when my first husband, James, died in a car accident. After 2 years of grief and healing, I met David. He was kind, understanding, and never felt threatened by the fact that I'd loved before. His mother, however, was a different story. A proper wife, Barbara would say at family gatherings, saves herself for one man. She'd say this while staring directly at me, usually over her third glass of wine. David would squeeze my hand under the table, silently apologizing for his mother's behavior, but never actually confronting her. When Barbara's 60th birthday approached, I saw it as an opportunity to finally bridge the gap between us. I'd spent the past 5 years watching her systematically erase my history from family conversations. Maybe as she could see our whole family story laid out in pictures, she'd understand that my past made me who I am today, the woman who loves her son. I spent 2 weeks collecting photos from everyone in the family. David's sister Emma provided childhood pictures. His Aunt Mary had beautiful shots from family vacations. I even found old black and white photos of Barbara as a young mother, looking at David with such pure love it made my heart ache. Then came the difficult decision. Should I include photos from my life before David? The pictures with James were part of my story. My first marriage wasn't some shameful secret. It was 4 years of love that ended in tragedy. After much contemplation, I included 3 photos. My favorite picture of James and me at our best friend's wedding, a group shot from our honeymoon with friends who were still part of my life, and one of James with his arm around my shoulders at my graduate school graduation. The album was beautiful when finished. I'd arranged everything chronologically, starting with Barbara's childhood, through her marriage, the birth of her children, and then expanding to include the families her children created, including mine. Each photo had a handwritten caption explaining its significance. I even left empty pages at the end titled Future Memories, hoping we'd fill them together as a family. The party was at Barbara's house, of course. She'd never let anyone else host her celebrations. I arrived early to help set up, carrying the wrapped album like it was made of glass. David kept telling me how proud he was of my effort to connect with his mother. This will mean so much to her, he said, helping me arrange the gift table. Mom loves family history. The party started well enough. Barbara held court in her favorite armchair, accepting gifts and compliments with equal enthusiasm. When she opened my gift, her initial reaction was promising. Oh, how lovely, she cooed, running her hands over the leather cover. A family album. Then she started turning pages. I watched her face change as she moved through the chronology. Her smile grew tight at the photos from David's first marriage. She'd never liked his ex-wife either, I realized suddenly. But when she reached the pages with James, everything imploded. What is this? Her voice cut through the party chatter like a knife. Who are these people? The room went quiet. David stepped forward. Mom. But Barbara was already standing, album clutched in her manicured hands. I asked you a question, Amanda. Who is this man with his arms around you? I kept my voice steady, despite my pounding heart. That's James, my late husband. Those photos are part of my history, part of who I am. Part of who you are. Barbara's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. Part of our family history. She strode to the fireplace, the focal point of her perfectly decorated living room. Without breaking eye contact with me, she tossed the album into the flames. My son's the only man who belongs in our family photos, she declared. I won't have my grandchildren confused about their heritage by some other man's pictures. The room erupted in gasps. Emma rushed forward to try salvaging the album, but it was too late. The leather cover was already curling in the heat. Mom. David's voice cracked with shock. Do you know how long Amanda worked on that? 2 weeks, I said quietly, reaching for my phone. I spent 2 weeks putting together your mother's history. But that's okay, Barbara. Because while I was collecting all those photos, I found something interesting. Something from 15 years ago that I think everyone here should see. Barbara's face went pale. She knew exactly what I was talking about. The photo she tried to make everyone forget. The one that proved she wasn't always so concerned about proper marriages and family purity. Amanda, don't, she whispered. But I'd spent 3 years being quiet. 3 years watching her systematically try to erase my past while pretending her own was spotless. The burning album was the last straw. I turned to the gathered family members who were watching this drama unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. Would anyone like to see Barbara's first wedding? The one she had 6 months before marrying David's father. The silence in the room was deafening. Barbara's perfectly arranged birthday party was about to become something else entirely. A lesson in the danger of trying to erase the past. The photo on my phone screen showed a much younger Barbara, beaming in a white dress next to a man who wasn't David's father. The date stamp read June 15, 1982. David's parents' wedding certificate, which hung prominently in their hallway, was dated January 8, 1983. That's impossible, Emma whispered, leaning closer to see the photo. Mom, who was that? Barbara's face had lost all color. She gripped the mantle of the fireplace where my album was still burning. Where did you get that? It was in your sister Mary's old photo boxes, I said calmly. Along with the wedding announcement from the local newspaper, you were married to Robert Thompson for exactly 4 months before having it annulled. Then you married David's father without ever telling him about your first marriage. The room erupted in murmurs. Aunt Mary, who had been quietly sipping her wine in the corner, suddenly found her shoes very interesting. That was different. Barbara's voice shook. I was young and foolish. It was a mistake that never should have happened. Like my marriage to James was a mistake. I stepped closer, my voice low but clear. The difference is, I don't hide my past. I loved James, and losing him nearly destroyed me. But that love, that loss, it made me who I am. The woman your son fell in love with. David moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. Mom, how could you never tell us about this? Because it wasn't important. Barbara's voice rose hysterically. I was barely 20. Robert turned out to be a drunk who gambled away our rent money. Your father saved me from that mistake. He gave me a real marriage, a real family. And James gave me 4 beautiful years before a drunk driver took him away, I countered. But you've spent 3 years treating me like I'm damaged goods because I loved before David. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Barbara, who'd spent years preaching about proper wives and pure family histories, had her own secret first marriage. Every Sunday dinner, I continued, you make little comments about how a woman should only have one love. Every Christmas, you conveniently lose the ornaments my first family gave me. You even told your bridge club I was divorced rather than admit I was widowed because it sounded better. Tears streamed down Barbara's face now, smearing her perfect makeup. I was protecting our family image. No, David interrupted, his voice firm. You were protecting your image, Mom, and you've been hurting Amanda in the process. Emma stepped forward, placing a hand on her mother's shoulder. Mom, do you remember what you told me when I was thinking about leaving Jack last year? You said everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. Isn't that exactly what Amanda found with David? Barbara sank into her armchair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The carefully maintained facade of family perfection she'd built over decades was crumbling around her. I spent 15 years, she whispered, making sure no one knew about Robert. I thought if I could just erase that part of my life, be perfect enough, proper enough. She looked up at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. And then you came along, so open about your past. So unashamed. Because I have nothing to be ashamed of, I said softly. And neither do you, Barbara. First marriages, lost loves, they're not shameful secrets. They're chapters in our stories. The photo album in the fireplace had burned to ashes now, but somehow the tension in the room had shifted. Barbara's perfect birthday party had turned into something raw and real. I have copies, I said quietly, of all the photos, even the ones of Robert Thompson, because erasing the past doesn't make it disappear. It just makes the present feel hollow. Barbara stood slowly, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. She looked around at her family, at the faces showing shock, disappointment, and most surprisingly, understanding. I suppose, she said carefully, we could start working on a new album. One that tells the whole story this time. It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from Barbara, it was seismic. 3 years of hostility were beginning to crack, revealing something that looked almost like hope. David squeezed my hand. I think that's a wonderful idea, Mom. And maybe this time we could all help put it together. As the party guests began to awkwardly disperse, Barbara caught my arm. Her grip was gentle, nothing like her usual commanding grasp. That photo, she said softly. The one of you and James at your graduation. Do you have another copy? A week after the birthday party disaster, I found myself sitting at Barbara's kitchen table, surrounded by photo boxes and albums. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating decades of memories spread across the polished oak surface. I kept everything, Barbara admitted, pulling out a yellowed envelope from the bottom of a box, even though I pretended it never happened. Inside were photos from her brief first marriage, moments of young love frozen in time. I recognized the hopeful smile she wore in those pictures. It was the same one I had in my photos with James. Why did you really hide these all these years? Barbara's hands trembled as she sorted through the images. When I met David's father, he was everything Robert wasn't: stable, responsible, devoted. I was so afraid that if he knew about my failed marriage, he'd see me differently. Then the longer I kept it secret, the harder it became to tell the truth. And that's why my openness about James bothered you so much, I realized, because I was doing what you couldn't. She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. Every time you spoke about James with such love and honesty, it reminded me of my own cowardice. It was easier to try to silence you than face my own shame. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, organizing photos chronologically. When we reached the pictures from my first marriage, Barbara paused. Tell me about him, she said softly. About James. I've spent so long trying not to hear his name, I never really listened. So I told her. About James's terrible jokes and his passion for teaching. About how he could never remember to put the cap back on the toothpaste, but always remembered to bring me coffee in bed. About the night we lost him, and how learning to live again didn't mean loving him less. And then I met David, I finished, who understood that loving James made me capable of loving him too. Barbara wiped her eyes with a tissue. I've been so wrong, Amanda. About everything. She reached into another box and pulled out a small photo album I'd never seen before. These are from my first wedding day. Robert may have been a mistake, but he taught me what I didn't want in a marriage. That knowledge led me to David's father. As we worked together creating a new family album, something shifted between us. The walls of perfectionism and pretense began to crumble, replaced by something real and raw and honest. David found us there hours later, surrounded by photos and sharing stories we'd never dared tell before. He stood in the doorway, watching his mother and wife finally finding common ground in their shared experiences of love and loss. Mom, he said, picking up a photo of Barbara in her first wedding dress, you look beautiful here. Why didn't you ever tell me? Barbara looked at her son, really looked at him. Because I thought you'd think less of me, just like I made Amanda feel about her past. I was so wrong, sweetheart. David pulled up a chair, joining us at the table. You know, Dad would have understood. He always said what he loved most about you was your capacity to love deeply. The new album took shape under our hands, not a sanitized version of family history, but a true one. Barbara's first wedding photos shared pages with pictures of James. Happy moments, sad moments, all the pieces that made us who we are. When we finished, Barbara ran her fingers over the cover. "I think," she said slowly, "we should show this at Sunday dinner. The whole family should know our real story." 2 days later, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was a familiar pearl necklace, Barbara's prized family heirloom that she'd always said would only go to a proper daughter-in-law. The note read, "For my daughter-in-law, who taught me that our past loves don't diminish our present ones, they prepare us for them. Love, Barbara." That Sunday, as our family gathered around Barbara's dining table, she stood and showed everyone the new album. There were gasps of surprise, tears, and finally, understanding. We were all human, all carrying our histories, all worthy of love. To new beginnings, Barbara raised her glass, looking directly at me, and to old loves that shaped us. I touched the pearls at my neck and smiled, thinking how sometimes the most beautiful things come from moments of breaking, like a family photo album burned to ashes only to rise again more complete, more honest, more real. Because in the end, it's not about erasing our past. It's about embracing how it led us to our present. And as I sat there, surrounded by my blended family, I knew that every love story, first, last, or in between, deserves to be remembered.